No speech about needing space, no visible collapse. It happens quietly, a delayed reply, a conversation shortened by a few sentences, a subtle tightening in the chest when someone gets too close. You tell yourself you're tired, busy, independent, not in the mood. You don't notice that something inside you has already stepped back. By the time you do notice, the distance is already there, and you don't know exactly when you left. Pulling away without noticing is not a personality flaw. It is not coldness. It is not proof that you are incapable of intimacy. It is a nervous system doing what it learned to do under pressure. For some people, closeness was never neutral. It was unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes invasive, sometimes absent, sometimes demanding. When you grow up in an environment where care is inconsistent, your body doesn't develop a simple association between closeness and safety. When caregivers are reliably attuned, a child relaxes into connection. When caregivers are distracted, overwhelmed, or inconsistent, the child adapts. The body learns that proximity can just as easily bring stress as relief. So the system becomes cautious. Not consciously, physiologically. A child cannot walk away from caregivers. So instead, the nervous system reorganizes itself around vigilance. It scans tone of voice, facial expression, the micro-shift in mood across the dinner table. It learns to anticipate threat before it fully forms. Hypervigilance becomes baseline, not as a thought pattern but as a bodily state. You don't choose it, it chooses for you. If you were also parentified, made responsible for managing a parent's emotions, mediating conflict, or becoming the mature one, you learned something else. You learned that closeness often came with responsibility, that love required emotional labor, that your needs were secondary to stability. In those systems, children become regulators. They monitor the room. They soften conflict. They anticipate collapse. Loyalty and obligation get tangled in ways a child cannot refuse. You adapt by becoming competent early. Competence gets rewarded. Your fear does not. Over time, needing becomes associated with burden. Rest becomes associated with danger. Because when you relaxed, something fell apart. When you expressed distress, someone else had less capacity. When you required comfort, it disrupted fragile balance. So your body learned a rule. Do not need too much. That rule does not disappear when you turn 25. It lives in your shoulders, in your jaw, in the speed of your responses, in the way your breathing shifts when someone asks, "Are you okay?" Pulling away in adulthood often begins when that rule activates. Someone moves closer emotionally. They ask for depth. They rely on you. Or worse, they offer to support you. Your body does not register this as safety. It registers exposure. Repeated childhood stress recalibrates the system. When stress is chronic, baseline functioning shifts. Threat detection sharpens. The body becomes efficient at mobilizing, less efficient at settling. And closeness requires settling. If your nervous system was shaped under pressure, settling feels foreign. Stillness feels suspicious. Rest feels undeserved. So when intimacy deepens, your physiology tightens. You may not label it anxiety. You may call it needing space, independence, personal boundaries. Sometimes it is boundaries. Sometimes it is an old survival strategy, misfiring in a safer room. Emotional suppression often becomes the bridge between closeness and distance. Pushing down internal states can reduce outward expression but increases internal strain. As a child, suppression may have protected you. It kept conflict from escalating. It kept you from overwhelming already overwhelmed adults. But suppression has a cost. When you consistently override internal signals, you lose fluency in them. So, in adulthood, you don't always know what you feel. You just know you need distance. Pulling away without noticing often looks like subtle numbing. You stop volunteering personal information. You respond instead of initiating. You listen more than you share. You convince yourself the relationship is fine. Inside, something is retracting. Hyperdependence plays its part. If you learned early that support was unreliable, you build self-sufficiency. It feels strong, clean, controlled, but hyperindependence is rarely about strength. It is about minimizing risk. If I don't rely on you, you cannot disappoint me. If I don't need you, you cannot withdraw. If I stay slightly separate, I remain safe. The problem is that intimacy requires mutual reliance. It requires moments of asymmetry, times when you lean more than you hold. If leaning feels like danger, you will unconsciously reduce proximity. You may choose partners who feel slightly out of reach, or emotionally intense but inconsistent. Familial dynamics. Your system recognizes the pattern. It knows how to operate there. Calm, stable closeness can feel unnerving. Attachment disruption doesn't only create fear of losing connection, it can also create fear of fully having it. Because having it means your body must soften, and softening was never neutral. Shame weaves quietly through all of this. When a child's needs are met with irritation, withdrawal, or emotional unavailability, the child does not conclude that the caregiver lacks capacity. The child concludes, "My need is wrong." Shame becomes internalized around dependency itself. In adulthood, this shows up as guilt for wanting reassurance, embarrassment for missing someone, irritation at yourself for feeling hurt. So instead of expressing longing, you reduce it. You'll pull away slightly before anyone can see how much you cared. His pulling away is rarely conscious sabotage. It is preemptive regulation. Your nervous system senses vulnerability increasing. It predicts potential pain. It reduces exposure. Threat anticipation operates quickly, long before conscious thought. Your body keeps track of past danger, even when the present looks different. A raised voice and delayed text. A subtle shift in tone. Your body recalls an older environment and tightens. You may become quieter, or more critical, or more self-contained. You might immerse yourself in work. Productivity feels safer than intimacy. Achievement does not ask for emotional exposure. Rest, on the other hand, does. When you rest in the presence of another person, you are not performing. You are not regulating them. You are simply there. For someone shaped by early responsibility, simply being can feel intolerable. There is often uneven development beneath the surface. You may be intellectually mature, emotionally perceptive, highly competent, and yet feel destabilized by ordinary closeness. You might manage a crisis with composure, but struggle to articulate your own hurt. This unevenness is not immaturity. It is adaptive prioritization. The brain developed what was necessary for survival. Other capacities were postponed. Pulling away without noticing is often the moment those postponed capacities are bypassed again. The hidden cost accumulates slowly. Loneliness that you cannot fully name. Relationships that never quite deepen. A pattern of being admired but not known. Hypervigilance continues long after the original environment changes. The room is safe now. The partner is stable. The crisis is over. But your nervous system does not update automatically. It continues scanning. It continues bracing. And bracing is incompatible with surrender. There is grief here, though it may not feel like grief. It may feel like irritation, restlessness, a persistent sense that something is slightly off in every relationship. You may believe you simply haven't met the right person, or that others are too needy, or that you value independence more than most. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it is a body that never learned that closeness could exist without cost. None of these adaptations were mistakes. As a child, vigilance preserved stability, suppression prevented escalation, competence earned approval, distance reduced harm. There were intelligent responses to real conditions. But adaptation becomes expensive when the environment changes and the strategy does not. Pulling away without noticing protects you from anticipated pain. It also protects you from sustained intimacy. It keeps you functional. It also keeps you slightly alone. There is no villain here, no pathology, no dramatic trauma required. Chronic subtle inconsistency is enough. Emotional unpredictability is enough. Early responsibility is enough. The nervous system does not measure severity the way adults do. It measures repetition. It measures unpredictability. It measures whether, in moments of distress, someone consistently came. If they did not, you came for yourself. That self-reliance became identity, and identity resists revision. The unsettling part is this: you may not feel distressed while pulling away. You may feel composed, rational, clear. The body is efficient at disguising protection as preference. But over time, something in you knows. It registers the narrowing, the reduction, the quiet shrinking of relational space. You sense that you are participating less than you could. Yet participation requires exposure. And exposure once required endurance. So the system hesitates. Healing, if it comes, does not look dramatic. It looks like noticing the moment you begin to withdraw. It looks like recognizing the tightening instead of obeying it immediately. It looks like understanding that your body is predicting an old outcome in a new environment. And most destabilizing of all, it looks like accepting that rest, care, and sustained closeness may not require payment anymore. For someone built on early vigilance, that realization is not comforting, it is disorienting. Because if safety no longer requires constant management, then the identity organized around managing can soften, and softening feels like stepping into unfamiliar terrain without armor. Pulling away without noticing once kept you safe. Not pulling away now may feel like stepping into uncertainty. The truth is quieter than reassurance. You were never distant by nature. You were adaptive. And adaptation does not disappear simply because the danger did. It waits for evidence. Sometimes, for the first time, the evidence is that the room is stable, the person is steady, and the cost of staying might finally be lower than the cost of leaving. But your nervous system will not assume that. It has to learn it. And learning safety, after building a life around vigilance, does not make you weak. It makes you someone discovering slowly, often reluctantly, that closeness no longer requires sacrifice, and that rest, care, and safety may not need to be earned.